2, 1. All right, this week on a very special edition of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon, we are here to celebrate the release, or actually the 50th anniversary of the release of a landmark LP from Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. This timeless masterwork by Gaye continues to resonate even 50 years later. We've invited two music veterans on the show today, BK Kirkland and Maxx Myrick, who will join Charles Kirkland and I over the next hour. We'll discuss this album, its impact, and a whole lot more. You keep it where you got it on episode 455 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to this special edition of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon. I'm joined by my co-host, Charles Kirkland. How are you, sir?
Doing great, man. Episode 455, man. This is a live one.
Well, this is a good one, man, because, this is a subject that I reached out to both these brothers, man, about 2 weeks ago. I knew the anniversary was coming up, and I really wanted to talk about this. This album is very impactful, very important to me, and it's timeless, man. I was listening to it earlier today, and it literally has themes that if he released it now, it would be as current now as it was back in 1971. But here to talk about it with us is our special guest, and this is his first time on the show, a man whose work I have followed. I'm not going to say for how long, but a man whose work I've followed for a long time, and a man whose work I respect. BK Kirkland, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Charles, for having me.
All right. And also joining us once again, our good friend, and he comes on and assists us in these types of shows. It is Maxx Myrick, another, can I say 40-year vet? Can I say that, Max?
45.
Okay. I didn't want to put it out there, man, because I didn't do anything with BK. So I was trying to. Yeah. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, so what's going on? I want to say it was the 11th LP from Marvin Gaye, was released on May 21st, 1971. But before the album was released, there's a long backstory that goes into it, which everybody here knows, but I'm just saying it for our audience. Back in 1969, a couple of events happened that really kind of put this album into motion. One, Marvin Gaye's duet partner, Tammy Terrell, suffered a fatal accident. Well, not actually, it wasn't fatal, but she suffered an accident, which later on became fatal for her, and when she died prematurely at the age of 24. So Marvin, of course, is devastated by that. He's corresponding with his brother who's over at Vietnam, Frankie Gaye, who's telling him the stories of things and experiences that he's having over in Nam. Obie Benson, who was a member of the Four Tops at the same time, had witnessed some police brutality in Detroit, came up with the concept of a song called What's Going On, offered it to the Four Tops. Of course, Levi Stubbs and crew passed on it. He approached Marvin Gaye. Is this a song you're interested in? Marvin liked it for a group that he was producing. You guys remember the Originals. When Marvin started playing with the song and tweaking it, he was like, you know what? I think I like this song. I think I want to work with this. He goes and talks to Berry Gordy that he wants to do this, what he would call a protest album. And of course, Berry Gordy was not feeling this idea at all because they were cultivating this image of him being a sex symbol at Motown. Him and Gaye, of course, his brother-in-laws at that point, because he's still married to Anna Gordy. And Marvin just basically told him, I'm not going to record anything if you don't want to let me record this. And despite the fact that he thought it was a horrible idea, Gaye went ahead and recorded it with the Funk Brothers backing it up. The first album that he's ever listed as a producer. The first album that the Funk Brothers actually even get credited, that people even know that they have been behind all these hits at Motown. And the album is a smash. So I will start with you, BK. Back in 71, when this album came out, I'm not going to ask you where you were, but what impact did it have on you the first time you heard this album?
Well, ironically, I was an English teacher at Patterson Eastside High School, which was my alma mater. And 1971, I was teaching English Lit. And I was trying to come up with a lesson plan to teach. And videotape, by the way. We had gotten some new equipment. Have you ever seen the movie Lean On Me?
I did, Joe Clark.
Well, that's my high school alma mater. And so I requisitioned for the day the new video recorder and a record player. And usually that stuff is signed out by the principal. Well, luckily the principal wasn't there that day. Sorry about that.
It's live radio.
This is live, right? So I requisitioned this new equipment and whatnot. And the principal wasn't there. Vice principal gave me the stuff. And I actually put together a lesson plan, Tim, off of the album What's Going On. And most of my students who were, 5, 6 to 10 years younger really hadn't, embraced Marvin Gaye as one of their favorite artists or anything. But we sat there and we went through line after line and song after song of Marvin Gaye. I had the volume turned up so high, eventually the principal came to see what's going on here.
That's what's going on. What's going on?
What's going on, right? Yeah. But I'd say this to you. I hadn't felt that way about any other particular recorded project enough that I would stand there and go face to face with the principal of the school to say, hey, this needs to be done. This needs to be taught to these people here. This is relevant. This is relevant on so many sides and avenues to young people, old people, and everybody else. This is really a part of our culture. I knew at that time then, even in 1971, this was a great, great project. And I'm so happy that Marvin went ahead against Berry's wishes and blessed us with this project.
All right. And Max, this predates your time in radio, man. So this is early 71, man, May of 71.
Yeah, it's kind of a coming of age album for me. At the time this album came out, I was about 14. And so FM radio had just come on the scene in my city. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, right outside of Detroit. And so, FM was playing long form programming. They played the long cuts. So, they stretched out so we could hear this whole, we could hear What's Happening, Brother. We could hear the whole songs. And so all of this was happening in my communities. This is right after Dr. King was, assassinated. Detroit was still burning. Our community, Black Panthers, were on the scene. It was an interesting time. And I was, like I said, coming of age when it came out. So, it impacted me. Just the messages, I could relate to it.
Now, Charles, you and I talked about this earlier today, and you made a good point where you said it almost plays, because I said it sounds like it plays almost like a movie, but you said sort of the same thing, that if you listen to it as a concept album, you get the title song, of course, where he sets up what's going on, all the problems. Then you go straight into What's Happening, Brother. Right. And which I think is really cool, because it's almost like a conversation where a guy is coming home, is everybody still going, is everybody going to party where we partied? Is our ball club, we're going to win the pennant? You think we got a chance? I mean, so it's I love the structure of the album. Talk a little bit about what Marvin did with that.
Well, exactly like you said, it plays like a storybook from the beginning to the end, and each song is just another story that goes along in this conversation that he's having until you get from what's going on to the ultimate at the end when he's talking about makes me want to holler. After all the stuff that he's experienced and he's come back from the war and he sees how bad things are, each song until he gets to the end, it's just a masterwork in what it has been put together from beginning to end. And I think that's why it's the number one song on the Rolling Stones whatever list, 500
biggest of all time.
Biggest of all time. And I don't know what it means to as for us as a nation, that the relevance of the songs from 50 years ago are still relevant now. Those same topics that are happening. It really is a sad commentary that we're still facing a lot of the same issues that he's brought up back then. We're facing them now. Like you said, it could be released today and just skyrocket to the top of the charts because it's so timely. It's so right on point with everything that's happening in the community.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to, I think I'm not sure why it's my favorite song, but I love Flying High on the Friendly Skies. And when he's singing from the angle of a person who's addicted, which is ironic because Marvin himself would become addicted much later on in his life. But at this point, he's singing. And I was telling Charles earlier, the line that always gets me when he says, I'll be all right, I'll be all right when night comes. I forget. Let me look it up because I don't want to butcher.
When the nighttime comes, I'll be all right, my friend.
Something that I'm paraphrasing, something about the boy. I think it's now I know I'm hooked, my friend, from the boy who makes slaves out of men. And I remember the line was referenced in New Jack City back in the day with Chris Rock and Ice-T kind of went through that exchange. It's just fascinating to me, man, just listening to that album. And as Charles just said, talk a little, BK, about the relevance, because when you talk about, the career that you were in when the album came out to where you are now, and seeing the power of language, the power of words, the power of how, another happy accident he had is when they were dubbing the album, the engineer made a mistake and blended Marvin's voice from like several takes together, and Marvin liked it and kept it. So when you listen to the album now, it's a very interesting kind of sonic sound where you're hearing Marvin duetting or layered with himself, different voices. Now, people may do that now, but was that relatively common in 1971?
Well, look at how many times that you've actually Googled or bought some sheet music or something like that to look at the lyrics of a song. And even though word for word all of that song, it's still a priority to go ahead and pull up the words to it just to, kind of reinforce the messages that are coming at you and whatnot. And there's so many messages, but there's so many relevant messages that blows your mind. I mean, he's got 6 banded tracks there, and each one of those tracks touches a multitude of people. I've talked to people a number of times, and my question was, why didn't Marvin or Motown decide to try to turn this into an opera? I thought that would be a perfect format for this particular project to be. If I could steal another minute of your time, I would tell you this story. I was sitting with Smokey Robinson one night, and I asked him about, what were some of his favorite tracks, and he eventually got to what's going on. And I believe that Smokey did say that was his favorite track. But this is the way that Smokey told me this story. Because Marvin had to fight with Berry. And Berry had left town because Motown was moving to LA.
Right.
So Marvin actually is rumored to have gone into the studios unauthorized and locked himself and barricaded himself in the studio. So Berry happened to be talking to Smokey one day and saying, I hear that Marvin's doing some strange stuff in the studio. Smokey, I want you to stop by and find out what he's doing. So Smokey got to the studios, and Marvin let him in and whatnot. And Marvin said, "Come on in, man. You got to hear this. This is something so powerful." He says, "I'm not writing this. God is writing this, right?" So Smokey said he took a step back to look at Marvin to see if he was high. Are you in your right mind? And that's the story of how Marvin actually went in unauthorized and recorded that project, which is, says a whole lot, because the entertainers at Motown didn't have the creative rights. to do anything that they wanted. And Marvin wanted to be a balladeer. He wasn't there to sing popular music. He always wanted to be, Sinatra. He wanted to be a crooner, wanted to be a balladeer. And so he saw this opportunity and he knew what he had to do. He barricaded himself in the studio. I mean, they could have called the cops and had him throw it out or something like that. But, the thing was that Smokey co-signed this album in terms of saying, Barry, this is going to be big. This is going to be something that, you should get behind and support. And it really was Smokey who convinced Barry that, we can put this out here. And the bottom line for Barry was always about making money. So,
right.
This album didn't make money initially, but it's made money over its 50-year span, and it's made notoriety for Motown Records over its span as well. So that's what I know about this project intimately from Smokey.
Well, it's funny you would say that because I saw a documentary called What's Going On, a PBS documentary. They interviewed Smokey, and he said exactly what you just said. He said, Marvin said, God is writing this album. He said, I didn't believe it at first. He said, but when I heard it, he was like, yeah, I believe he's right. So Max, again, both you and BK have programmed and worked in the business doing that. And neither of you were programming when this album came out. What would have been the challenges, as you heard Charles, and I guess, I think BK, you also, no, it was you, Max, who talked about listening to it in Ohio in long form, because as an album, it was something really different. It was a concept album. And we didn't really get a lot of those. Matter of fact, we hadn't had any of those in the R&B or the soul space. Well, unless you count Hot Buttered Soul, which I consider a concept album, but nobody else does. But how do you program an album that's a concept album that has so many singles off of it this way, which is probably better listened to in totality?
Well, that's what made Black radio so special during that period of time, because we could play anything we wanted to play, right? And we could play those long songs. We just played the best music. And if the album had 3 or 4 cuts, we weren't like the top 40 stations which played, 10 songs over and over and over. We played them long cuts. So, we played Mercy, Mercy, and we played What's Happening, Brother, and we played What's Going On. We play the whole album, whatever was, and each DJ had their favorite song on the album. So, depending on who was on the air at the time, back in those days, you'd hear another cut. But because it was Black radio, because it was FM, and the FM was a new format for Black music, they just had the freedom to do that. And Black radio pretty much has been that way up until probably the late 90s, when it started changing and the big corporations bought it, and then they projected their bias on it and changed it.
Well, I actually had that on 8-track, a bootleg 8-track. Wow. But it sounded good.
I don't even know how you bootleg an 8-track, but
8-tracks were the best.
I say today it's much better than vinyl.
Oh yeah, it sounded great, and it's because you're especially in a car, because you're in
had that reverb sound packaged in it.
Yeah, you're right in there, and the
compression,
the tape. Oh man, it sounds great.
You said something, BK, that I think I've never heard those two words together: bootleg and 8-track. I've never heard that. I'm like thinking, how do you bootleg 8-track?
Man, everybody had their little.
It was like the mix
box. You know how you used to have a box for 45s?
Right.
In the early 70s, once the conversion started because everybody didn't have the opportunity to get FM or FM stereo, unless you bought the converter and all of that crap. But a lot of cars had put a stereo 8-track inside of a AM format and whatnot. I didn't have FM, but that's what I had. And that's how I most enjoyed listening to that album, was on 8-track stereo.
So, Charles, I'm going to read this lyric to you. This is from, I want to say it's from Makes Me Want to Holler. This is what I was telling you earlier. Crime is increasing. Trigger happy policing. Panic is spreading. God knows where we headed. He wrote that that, I mean, and I guess to somebody's point who said it earlier, that's a sad commentary that that's still a reality 5 decades later, that we still like when you sing about Mercy, Mercy Me, and he's singing about a bit about the environment. Again, still a current problem. None of the stuff that he talks about has gone away or has been solved, which is probably why we talk about it as being a timeless album in concept. So I would agree with Smokey. I mean, I believe that, you know, you look at Marvin's work, Trouble Man follows this album. Of course, he has the love affair with Janice, who he later marries, and you get, what's the name of that album? Let's Get It On from 73, and then on and on and on. Marvin was immensely talented, but Marvin had demons, man. And I think part of those demons is what makes his work so profound. For an example, we lost Paul Mooney yesterday. Paul Mooney is another individual who I thought was immensely talented, got a chance to spend a lot of time with him in radio. Sort of reminds me of that brilliant yet conflicted person. Is that the best? Is that the art that's created, or are those the vessels that creativity stems from both of you guys who kind of have worked in the business with a lot of these people?
Well, they say that art imitates life. So I think that's a direct correlation there. And this album certainly is reflective of that. This is art imitating life. It wasn't that Marvin came up with all of these particular situations as much as he just went ahead and expounded on those. So it's art imitating life. And I think that that's, you know, more often what really happens. I don't think anybody in the creative space just invents all on their own a project this important. Usually there'd be a whole lot of people involved in an album project. That's why you have AOR. That's why you have writers, arrangers, and whatnot. But this is pretty much just Marvin, which is unbelievable at the time in terms of look at the technical behind this too. You've already mentioned that, you know, this is a timeless album that it stands today, production-wise, and that's a very big statement on its own. And the package itself is just, you know, a phenomenal gift to people who love music.
Max?
I think, like BK was saying, it's, you know, it's a reflection of the times. Music's always a reflection of the times. And Marvin was a messenger. He was the messenger that spread the message of that time. Unfortunately, that time it just has not changed very much. You know, it's like they set the clock back to 1968 all over again. And here we are. None of these stories are new. It's the same old, same old, same old. And you were talking about Paul Mooney and some of these other great messengers who had issues or demons. You know, they were also messengers. They lived those lives, and they were just reporting on the lives that they lived.
Wow.
And that takes courage. I mean, you know,
yes, absolutely.
It takes a lot of courage because the culture is like, no, you can't. But, you know, it takes a lot of courage to speak out, to be the messenger.
Yep.
Well, Charles, when you hear stories about Marvin locking himself and barricading himself in the studio, because it was quite obvious that from what we know and what we've heard, that Barry wasn't on board with this. And, you know, we're going to talk several months about another project that Barry wasn't on board with, which was Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. Another one, he was like, yeah. But he relented. So Barry Gordy was an amazing businessman, but thank God that there were other people who overruled him when it came to the music. So when you listen to these stories about creativity, you know, from a spiritual standpoint, you and I are having these conversations, and I think both BK and Max touched on it a little bit. that, you know, sometimes, you know, we're all products of our environment and of the circumstances and situations. But it's also, you know, you're looking at the art that flows through a person like Marvin Gaye. And, you know, for no better example, think about Hear My Dear, which was supposed to be sort of a throwaway album for Marvin. And his competitive juices took over, and he creates this album that people weren't feeling it back in '78 when it dropped. But over time, it has become this cult project that tells the story of his relationship, his marriage with Anna Gordy. So talk a little bit about the vessel that's being used, that of course was Marvin Gaye, because now, as we just did a show last year, this is regarded as the greatest album that's ever been released. It's the #1 album on Rolling Stone's 500 list. And Berry Gordy's even come out and said it's the greatest project that's ever come out of Motown.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, like you said, Berry didn't even want to do this thing, and I think it was the Black Godfather I saw one time where they even had a bet over this, whether it was going to be a success or not. And Gordy was like, if it becomes a success, then you can do more, and other people can do more. And if it wasn't for the success of what's going on, would we have Papa Was a Rolling Stone and all these other things that came, these protest songs that came after this? I mean, Motown really changed its complexion after this album was released. So the impact of this album upon musical culture from that point on is unbelievably remarkable to see what we have now because of this. And like I said before, almost every musician, every talented person that comes forth has trouble that they've overcome to get to where they are. And oftentimes that trouble motivates them to be the voices that they become. Marvin Gaye had lots of problems, and it was the problems that made him and the ability to overcome them that made what he did special. And like I said, the impact of what he did with this album is remarkable.
Now, BK, you know, it's funny, Charles touched on something that I was going to talk a little bit about, the concept album, right? Where all the tracks run into each other. Smokey Robinson, who was there and kind of witnessed it 4 years after this, would create The Quiet Storm, which was his suite of love songs, which is a similar album. And then Stevie Wonder, a year later, puts out Songs in the Key of Life, which is a double album where songs kind of flow into each other. So in addition to what it did for concept albums, it also changed the game in Motown, because at that point, Marvin was able to punch his own ticket for his level of creativity. I'm producing my own stuff. I'm not a part of the Motown factory. Stevie had to fight for it as well in the early 70s. Smokey was just always Smokey, so they just gave Smokey free reign. Talk a little bit about the impact of that in Motown, and then what other artists who came along and saw what was cooking at Motown, and how that changed Black music during that time period.
Isley Brothers, The Heat Is On, Side 2, the 3 strong ballads back to back to back. They're the concept album that, you know, I truly enjoy. Well, you know, Tim, I know that Stevie and Marvin kind of followed the same pathway there. You know, when they got towards the end of their contracts, Berry had to make a decision. So Marvin puts out there, Hear My Dear, and Stevie put out there, The Secret Life of Plants. All right, and these were their final albums saying, you know, you're not going to make another dime off of me, Berry, but I'm going to meet, right, the contract, because I owe you an album. So here's Secret Life of Plants, and here's Hear My Dear. Neither one of them got any notoriety or any significant airplay, but this is how people had learned how to deal with Berry. The best way to deal with Berry is to cut off the revenue stream. I mentioned it before. Berry's all about one thing. He's about the money. one of the things too, see, Berry's concept of early Motown in the 60s was built around his principle of he was making music beyond race. He also, if you go back and look at a lot of the 60s material that's available to you, and deeper into these albums, these guys sang standards. I mean, the Temptations did Old Man River, and they did a bunch of show songs and whatnot from Broadway plays and things like that as well. So that Berry's, experience of this business was, a little bit off to the left in terms of, he truly wasn't a real supporter of R&B. He's a supporter of pop R&B, crossover. That's where his mentality was, because he wanted to sell to white audiences. He also approached very, very often white DJs and things like that. But let's talk about Psychedelic Soul for a second. He didn't sign off on that. Berry wasn't, that's because Norman Whitfield just wouldn't go away. Norman just harassed Berry until he gave him the studio time. And even after they had done, not Papa, it was Psychedelic Shack, Runaway Child. I mean, it was a different time in terms of the evolution of R&B had taken another step, and maybe Berry was a half a step behind them. That belonged to Whitfield and Smokey co-signing a lot of that in terms of, Smokey's been very instrumental in Motown. I mean, that's why he became eventually the president of Motown, because, I don't believe that Berry could let Smokey go. And so Smokey's kind of like the Quincy Jones. These guys really are focused in what's happening today. They can see how to apply today's trends in the music. Don't worry about shunning it. Just go ahead and embrace it and use it. Find a way to use it. And that's what they did.
Max, talk to me about the impact, man.
Of Marvin Gaye, like
right.
Everybody's been saying. I mean, without Marvin Gaye doing that album, would Stevie Wonder have, had the courage to tell Berry Gordy, I'm not doing another album for Motown unless I can do what I want to do. I'm leaving, Berry. And then we went. Where would we have been without Stevie Wonder's wonderful gift? And where would we have been without Norman Whitfield's messages? I mean, and where would we have been without Marvin Gaye's messages?
Yep.
I mean, it's all of those, and all of that music is still timely. All of it. All of the music that he inspired,
yeah, absolutely,
is still timely now. It doesn't sound dated. Doesn't sound, now some of the earlier Motown stuff does. It sounds, there's a whole movement in England, the Northern Soul movement.
Yeah,
that whole Amy Winehouse retro.
Right.
But that sounds like that time period. It's great music. It still sounds great, but it doesn't have the timelessness of the and the depth of the Marvin Gayes and the Stevie Wonders and the Norman Whitfield. Stevie Wonder did a whole tour off of just one album.
Yeah.
He did like a whole Songs in the Key of Life tour just for one album. That's how impactful that album was, and that's how impactful Marvin Gaye's influence was on him.
So this album, of course we know it enhanced it in stature, but did the album personally do more harm than good for Marvin? I mean, we lost him like 13 years after this, man, with all of the drama. And, I was watching this documentary, I guess, called What's Going On. And it was kind of sad, of course, to see the decay, as you said, once he went to Belgium, kind of cleaned up, came back. Unfortunately, I think if he would stayed in Belgium, we'd be having a very different conversation about Marvin Gaye right now. But it is what it is.
Well, I got a quick story to drop in here real quick. Let me see, this is 1978. I was working at WBLS, and Radio City, one of the most famous venues in New York City for theater and music and whatnot, had never had a Black show at Radio City. And Morris Levy had booked Marvin Gaye and Barry White's Love Unlimited Orchestra. I don't remember at this time who opened the show, but just such a phenomenal night because Radio City really didn't want the show. Morris paid double to everybody to pull the show off, so that's how it actually became. There were a whole lot of incidents backstage that night with regards to everybody Black backstage, including myself. We had to go through security, and the venue security stopped everybody too, because you had to have a union card. And I mean, you know, we're all DJs and whatnot and hanging out. CBS says, come by and meet Marvin. But we had to show credentials just to get backstage. They tried every way that they could to keep us off the stage because they didn't want us to introduce Barry or Marvin or anything, no involvement in the show. You know, they were expecting their guy to come out in his white guy and tails and whatnot and speak to 3,000-4,000 Black people and, you know, do it his way. So luckily, Marvin wasn't intimidated about stepping in on that, because there were a whole lot of conferences backstage and from dressing room to dressing room, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because they just restricted so much. But anyway, the point became that Marvin broke barriers that night, and so did Barry White, in terms of now these people who own venues as big as Radio City realized that these people can make money for you. And shortly after that, the cap came off and opened up for, I think the next big show I remember seeing there after Marvin and Barry was Al Green. Al Green was next. And then after Al Green was Teddy Pendergrass. And so for a little bit there, WBLS had a great home in Radio City, because we were doing a lot of shows at Madison Square Garden at that time. But Madison Square Garden was just kind of too big. It was great for like Earth, Wind and Fire, but, you know, people who didn't need as much acoustical sound or compressed sound, you know, Radio City was just such a better venue. And so Marvin broke down that barrier because he's the first headliner at Radio City.
Wow. BK? I mean, BK. Max? I keep going to you, man, because, you know, because you guys are, BK is probably more Northeastern, I would say. You're more Midwestern. So I'm trying to get the idea. I'm trying to move back and forth. And Charles, of course, is here. That's more Southern in nature. So, yeah, we talked about the impact of Gaye. And I was asking the question, did it hurt him? The success of that album, because it sort of changed his dynamic. He was headed in that direction, wanting to be a star, became the star. Was it helpful though?
I think he went in the, I mean, as far as, I mean, I was a consumer of his music after, you know, so for me, every album that he put out was great. I mean, when the Let's Get It On album was, came out during my formative years. It was a soundtrack to some memorable events. You know,
let's keep it G-rated here.
You know, and then he came, and then I don't know what album had "Holy Holy" on it. That was more.
This one.
It was on this one.
Yeah,
it's on this album.
Yeah,
but then he did the Live in London album.
Oh yeah, at the Palladium.
Great, yeah. Palladium. Then he had the album with "Got to Give It Up" on it, which was there's like a whole new vibe for him. You know, it was a dance song. You know, and then he ran. I think after that he may have run into some problems, and he had to spend some time over in Belgium. But then there was a guy named Larkin Arnold who was at Columbia at the time. Mm-hmm. And he went over to Belgium and convinced Marvin to come back, got his tax situation straightened out. And at the time when he came back, it was when MTV had hit. And so now he came back with Sexual Healing and video. So a whole brand new audience for him. You know, BET had started to come on the scene. So Marvin reached a whole new group of people. You know, Marvin didn't tour that much. I don't think he really toured that much in his career, but he toured after that and was doing, you know, arenas. I saw him at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. It was a great show. I mean, he came out, I think he did the whole show in a robe and pajamas.
Yeah.
It was great though. It was like, you know, Detroit was like, yeah, Marvin, whatever you say. You know, so I don't know if it hurt him, but as a consumer, the music was great.
Charles, what do you think? Because you probably the youngest person on this panel, man. So talk to us about what this album means. I mean, when I say the youngest person, you ain't considerably younger. You just younger than everybody else. You in the same pocket of age, but you know.
Okay, I think the question was, what does this album hurt Marvin Gaye? Is that what you're asking?
Or I was saying, I mean, I'm assuming that people like Max was just saying that Max is saying that he, of course, he enjoyed all of the music, but I'm talking about personally. There's no way to ever know. We don't know, but
I think honestly, if he did not make this album, it would have hurt him more. I think if we look back into the time where he was doing this, he was like, I think you mentioned before, he was stressed over the death of Tammy Terrell. You know, his marriage wasn't going very well. And he had this idea of himself inside that he wasn't getting while he was at Motown, and so he had to make this album. If he did not come out with this album, I don't think Marvin Gaye would have ever been anything after this, because this was the album that gave him his identity. He had done things before that were along the lines of Motown and what Berry Gordy had wanted, but that was not who he was, not who he wanted to be. And this album gave him his voice. And so I don't think it hurt him at all. I think it established him as the entertainer that he wanted to be, that he envisioned himself being. It gave him the ability to produce that he hadn't had before, to create, to speak. And I think without this album, we would not have half the music that we have today.
So BK, why is it important, man, for us to celebrate this album and keep it on our lips and pass it along to folks to understand? Because there's a whole new generation that probably never heard. I would say probably never heard. Everybody, I'm assuming, knows who Marvin Gaye is, but they probably have never heard this album. Why is it important for things like we're doing right now to keep the conversation going about what's going on?
Well, you have to remember this, that Rolling Stone only made the correction and made this the #1 album of all time in the last year, maybe 18 months. Right. Prior to that, it probably was lost somewhere in the top 10.
It was number 6. It was number
six.
6,
right? Mm-hmm. But kind of lost because I couldn't tell you who number 2 is, or 2 through 10. I don't even remember. I mean, if you brought up some albums, I'd probably say, yeah, that should be. But this just really kind of co-signs what the Black community has always felt. When you walked into somebody's house in 1971, 72, 1980, while people still had vinyl, and you looked down on the floor, because everybody had their record collection down on the floor, I'm sure prominently displayed somewhere was Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. It was like that album that you had to have. I watched a great documentary the other night, and it featured America's songs. I mean, you know, these great anthems from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And one of the songs that I remember vividly from being a child was the Battle Hymn of the Republic, right? Mm. And it stands in civil rights and things like that. Very early music, but inspirational music. This album pretty much says the same thing to me that, you know, Battle Hymn of the Republic says. Says it at a different time in a different way or whatnot, but it's kind of exploratory. I mean, you know, it's not that Marvin's talking about right now, but I think also too, Marvin is kind of saying he sees the future here. All right. If you go ahead and check out this album that just came out maybe last year, Marvin, I mean, they had some stuff in the can that they put out. I'm trying to remember now the name of the song, but I think it's the answer to what's going on. It's called Where Are We Going? And Don Mizell actually did the remix on this track. After you get off of here tonight,
right?
Please listen to this. Tell your audience to listen to it as well. It's called Where Are We Going? Which, you know, I listened to it the first time I heard it. I said, you know, this may be his answer to what's going on. And I think that, so, you know, because some of it leaves you kind of in the air here. And there seems to be an answer out there called Where Are We Going?
Wow. Max? Yeah, Max is looking it up right now.
I was writing it down because
it's a great
song. I want to look it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got about maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes to go. When's the last time any of you guys have listened to this album? I'm assuming everybody got a chance to peek it out this week and to prepare to talk about it today.
Yeah. Well, I did a show on, not a show, but a segment on POTUS on Sirius XM. We're getting ready to do a roundtable discussion coming up on Sirius XM with Jan Gay. Jan's going to join us for like 2 or 3 hours, and we'll be talking about the project and whatnot. I think the difference today is that, you know, I said this to a friend the other night. You know what I love about the music of the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Gosh, you know, laying on the floor of my basement right now are albums without jackets.
Wow.
And especially because I've been working from home. But I've been listening to a lot of 8, 10, 12-minute cuts by artists. And, you know, back then you just put the needle on side one, track one, and you didn't touch it for 45 minutes or so. It banded all the way through. And a lot of albums back then also had these great, you know, solos and instrumentation and whatnot that we truly miss in popular music today because it's all about the melody. Yeah, I mean, I listened to this album maybe once a month or so. I can still do that, and I can do it with enjoyment, not just out of repetition. Some people have to do it out of repetition. I do it out of enjoyment, maybe once a month or so.
Now, Max, I know you heavy into your blues and jazz, man. Do you get a chance to Marvin Gaye? What's going on? Unless, watch this. Unless I tell you we doing the show, and then you forcibly go and listen to it.
No, I listen to it all the time. I mean, I listen to not only the original versions, but I listen to versions by other people.
Other people, yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people that have re-recorded this, and there's a lot of Marvin Gaye remix versions of these tracks too that are out there. And then there's, you know, other artists that have done some, like Aretha Franklin did her version of Holy Holy, which is one of the great, you know, renditions of it. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those songs when you see things going on, you want to listen to that song because it just it reinforces what you see, but it also kind of soothes you at the same time. You know, this album is really therapeutic because it lets you know that you're not crazy. You know.
Yeah, right.
It's funny you were saying as BK is going.
Like, you know, something's going on here, you know.
Yeah, for real.
No, but I was gonna say, you know, I listen. I have a set of what I call classic albums. I try to listen to Love Supreme once a month. I spend a lot of time. I don't get a kind of blue in as much as possible, but What's Going On is definitely one of those albums that I have to keep revisiting over and over. And then it helps me revisit other Marvin Gaye projects that I really like. But the funny thing about me, I love a lot of Marvin's work post What's Going On. I'm not really, I mean, I guess maybe since I wasn't old enough that I don't really have an appreciation. I mean, I like the music that Marvin made pre What's Going On, the duets with Tammy Terrell, Stubborn Kind of Fella, Hitchhike, and all those songs, but they don't really speak to me like all of his post What's Going On work. Like I can listen to Trouble Man, which is really interesting because as a film critic, Trouble Man, the movie, is horrible. The best part of Trouble Man is the score. Which Marvin Gaye created. So am I the only one that feels this way about this man's career and his work? I mean, BK and Max, you guys are slightly older than Charles and I, so you may have a different feeling about his pre What's Going On work.
I'm with you. I like that other stuff. I heard it through the grapevine and you know, the Tammy Terrell stuff, but I really like the stuff that came after that.
Yeah, attached to it, more attached to it.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is, Trouble Man got a little more because of the Marvel universe. You know, the Trouble Man was mentioned as
Robin Hooks.
Oh yeah. So I don't listen to as much as often as I do because I have an extensive things that I listen to. But I do get Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album in every maybe 2-3 months. It comes up for me, and it may be they mentioned in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It may be the Underground Railroad played Holy Holy at the end of one of their episodes and threw me into, I got to listen to this album. and once you hear one song off this album, it puts you into the whole album. You got to listen to the whole thing. And because I think it's the way the album is laid out, is you listen, you hear one song, you're like, oh man, but this song relates to this song. And so you go to the beginning and go all the way through and just enjoy.
Charles, your favorite song off this album?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say Mercy, Mercy Me.
BK?
I like Mercy, Mercy Me.
Are you going to be unanimous, Max?
I like the title track. I like the whole album, but the title track speaks to me the most.
Well, the title track is funny. I was online today and somebody, I guess in 2019, did a video of What's Going On, and they kind of use scenes from Ferguson and some of the things that are happening now. And it's so ironic because you look at it and it wasn't like they had to go far in order to make it fit. It's the same situation now as you had in 1971.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
That's sad.
So going back to Where Are We Going? The first lyrics in that is where are we going? What's the future showing? But if you have a chance, listen to that. And I mean, I'm such a Marvin Gaye fan. I mean, I listen to all of the remixes that people do. There's a mixer named Tony Morales, a big time producer in New York. He redid Marvin's I Want You with a different tempo. That really is, I mean, he turned it into a funky dance song. If you have a chance, that's another Marvin Gaye classic you might want to re-explore, rediscover.
Well, you know, before you came on, Max Myrick, who I have a great deal of respect for, told us that BK was the godfather. He wasn't lying. BK got stories.
Yeah, I know a couple of people.
Now, BK and I, before I let you go, BK and I worked together at Magic 102.3. Yeah. God, BK, what was that, 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, what is that, 1990?
I was there in
97.
I came in 96.
Yeah, 96, 97.
I was telling the story before you got on. I was starstruck when I met BK because I was like, man, this is the dude whose career I had followed for a while. And you were part of the legendary crew at BLS, man. So, you know, and Max, of course, I've never been to Chicago, so I haven't heard Chicago radio, but the people on the streets in Chicago have told me about the work you were doing in the Chi. So
absolutely.
I was trying to live up to BK's standards. That's all.
No.
That's all I'm trying to do.
Max, one of the premier programmers in the country, that, you know, I mean, if you had the good luck to be a programmer, a Black programmer in a major market, and this is the time when we were kicking some pop radio's butt. Yes. I mean, we were putting smoke in between us and them. It'd be 2, 3, 4 points.
Yeah, I didn't even know, you know what.
We wouldn't even let these boys catch us.
I didn't even look down that far on the page. I mean,
and this music is what propelled us there. I look back at these songs and whatnot, and you know, you look back with hindsight, and the wonderful thing is when you look at the strength of these playlists that we were throwing at these boys, it wasn't that difficult. we had bullets in our gun.
When we dropped Isaac Hayes, by the time I get to Phoenix on them at night on the Quiet Storm, what are they going to do?
Wow. Game over.
We had them for 13 minutes.
Game over.
Charles, you see what this is what I came up under, you know, Sonny Taylor, who's another guy.
Sonny,
New York guy.
Mentor.
Yeah, man. Sonny, man. Yeah. So that needs to be another show about Black radio, because I've heard great stories over time. I got into radio late. You guys were there riding it out, man. I did radio like the last 10 years before the game sort of changed to MP3s and became a lot less personality driven, I would say. Uh-oh.
Max is reaching.
There's a book about Black radio.
Oh,
this is a good starter.
Jack Gibson.
Book. It was written by Jack the Rapper, and it's about the history of Black radio, and it's a really good place to start.
Voiceover. It's called The Voiceover.
Called Voiceover, the Making of Blackradio, and that's Jockey Jack Gibson on the cover, who everybody knows as Jack the Rapper.
Well, fellas, I want to thank all you guys. And BK, don't be a stranger, man, because we did a show about a year ago, the Rolling Stones show, which I thought worked really, really well. We should have had you for that one, man, because that was great. That was a great hour discussion about how they had moved the list around. And of course, at the time, I'm going to put Max on blast. Max was like, yeah, you know, Thriller should be #1. But
I mean, just based on sales alone.
Let me clarify the record. Max was not the only one. He was not the only one that said Thriller should be #1.
I liked what's going on at the top spot. I really did.
All right.
All right, gentlemen.
I'm glad because now people are talking about the record, and maybe they'll listen to the lyrics. A whole new generation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I would implore you to listen to it with the lyrics, because the lyrics are absolutely amazing from song 1 to whatever the final song is. I think it's a 9-song project. What's going on?
It is 9 songs. Yep.
9 songs. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to check out the lyrics. But BK Kirkland, Max Myrick, I want to thank you guys. Charles Kirkland. We'll be back for another version of our show on Saturday, but this one we'll definitely have it the anniversary for tomorrow. I'll spend a lot of time with this album tomorrow and a lot of times thinking about this album. But I want to thank you guys for coming on, man, and giving me some time tonight so that we can discuss the legacy of what's going on. You guys take care, man, and thank you.
Gentlemen.
All right.
Nice to meet you, Charles. We've got to communicate a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Are you guys really cousins?
We're going to find out. As of right now, yeah.
Take care, gents.
All right, guys. Got to go.
All right.